And the first speaker is Frank from Picterra. So actually, he's CTO, technical officer, and a co-founder from Picterra. He has experience in signal processing and electrical engineering. And as far as I know, he's also lecturer at EPFL in his sparse free time. And he will talk about machine learning in terms of extracting geospatial information with a particular focus on near real-time alerts, which is a really interesting topic if you just think about climate change, but also recent changes driven by humans. So it's yours.
Thanks. Hi. Thanks very much. Thank you all. I mean, for organizing this GeoVision. I'm very happy to be there. And a very nice initiative to do that in these COVID times. I mean, still good to gather. I'm happy to today to present you this. I mean, the idea was also to bring to you a little bit that you see what we are doing in that field, but also to bring up some questions or let's say a bit of material to think and step back and think through. I mean, here what is interesting is to see what was saying Raik about machine learning that really broke through, let's say, into remote sensing and geospatial geospatial industry. And what's interesting is to see now, so we have really all that power, all that tool, and so there's really things that I think we have managed to make it and to commoditize, let's say, to make accessible. And there's other things that are a bit more tricky, let's say, to or have less grasp on it, for instance, satellite imagery, and where we have to kind of compose with those aspects that may not necessarily be at the level we would like them to be. So I think it's interesting. I also want to question that a bit at the end. I will show you where we are going now. So we went really down this road of how to extract information from imagery in an easy way, and now moving really into this near real-time alerts, what we are doing and what's the road ahead of us, basically. So Picterra, so we started 5 years ago. Soon we'll celebrate 5 years. We'll be at the limit, to be still able to call ourselves a startup. But I mean, we started on the campus of EPFL together with Pierrick, and now we are a bit more than 15 people. Still not far from EPFL. I mean, we still stay around that ecosystem, but we are just nearby the campus. So these are some of the key people there. And now we are really also, in terms of company, we have quite a balanced team. I would say that we are kind of covering all the typical aspect that you need to have in a company. And that's interesting to see how you develop over years. I mean, you start first with some engineer, and then you have to have more people on the marketing, on the sales. So that's also one aspect of that journey, that to come up with the right team for the right product that is aligned with the applications that you want to cover. And so what we've been doing and what was at the core, really the core of Picterra, was really this idea of exploiting all this machine learning, deep learning that was out there, to make it a bit more, let's say, transparent, or let's say, in that sense, that's for me when we talk about, for instance, the revolution of deep learning or what it brought. I think there's always a little bit this spike, this hype, where everyone wants to become the expert of deep learning. That is nice. Everyone is discovering, and then there's the phase after where, okay, good. Now what can we do with that? Can we go a step further? And it's a bit less about which algorithm is behind, but what it can achieve. And so that was really the idea, to bring that a bit back under the hood and really work in this human in the loop aspect. How can you really have an intuitive interface, an interface that doesn't require to have a crazy infrastructure, IT infrastructure. So it's a cloud-based platform. You just need your browser, and then from there make it easy to start to basically extract information. And there was two key elements we had to tackle. One is the fact that together with deep learning, usually you have this aspect of the need for a lot of data, a lot of training data. So how and this then gets quickly out of reach for the people. So we need to have a way to handle that, and that for the users, that it starts to be, they start to be able to build that training data in a more efficient way than just having to request some support to get suddenly 50,000 examples of the object they want to extract. So there was really this idea of iteration. You start to build a model quickly, you get outputs, you validate, and then you go on until you reach the level you want. So we really worked on that, on this iterative aspect. And then next to that is basically the so the aspect that you want to deploy that still at a certain scale. So this is good to be able to yourself customize and train an algorithm. Then you really want still to be able to apply it at a large scale, at a country, at a large, yeah, really large scale. And so that's where we had to really make the infrastructure scale behind, and that was one advantage of being then cloud-based, is that we could make also that part quite transparent to the user. But so really beyond what we are doing there was this idea that we wanted to get away from the typical way you would deal with building up, for instance, the extraction of a certain type of information from imagery, or getting into this alert or near real-time alert. You will have to deal with all the side of the data. Or do you source? Where do you get, if it's satellite data, aerial data, or do you source that? Then this training data set, or do you handle that? How much do you need of it? And then back and forth, basically, between the customer and us about designing the model. Is it doing the right things, or do you deploy that in production? So all these elements, we wanted to kind of bring them together in our solution, and to shorten the time you loop through that. And so one aspect that I didn't mention there is really also this data aspect. So how do you bring basically our users closer to the data? So more on the side of the satellite data, of course, but still on the aerial side of things, we try to have a way that it's easy to connect to external servers like the WMS server, for instance. And on the satellite side, we try to make it also easy that that you can task new imagery, and that you can look through archive, because that's one of the key elements still, that you need to interact a little bit with this data and be able to plug the right data into your workflow. So we opened that platform so in 2018, and since then a lot of people, let's say, went through, and we have been having this free trial that you can start with, and then there's different plans. But what was interesting is that actually there was quite a lot of people that were into what we call positive impact, but so basically working quite directly towards the sustainable goals, development goals of the UN. And that is something that we quite care about, and that we've seen interesting. Sometimes it was unexpected, actually, at the use case. So we had people doing the rural electrification, for instance. They were mapping villages to understand how they would connect to the grid, and things like that. They were also discovering. That was something very interesting also, when you have a, let's say, really a tool that people can use, and that you make it a bit more accessible, is that you start to discover also the creativity of the people and what they start to do with that. Around that, so what I was mentioning, and that's the next step, and that's what will lead us to what I will show you about this near real-time monitoring and alerting. Now let's say we know to extract information in quite an efficient way, I would say. Now we have to solve more this aspect of data, or do you feed the data? And when you want to go into alerting, into monitoring, you need to have to really handle that part in a way that it's then automatic. So how do you put in place this feed of imagery, and how do you manage that this is also affordable for most of the application? And this is where we don't have all the lever, I would say. We cannot leverage or put the pressure on the satellite provider, but still there's things that can be done. And there we've tried to find the right partners in order to come up with something more flexible. And one key thing that you may have heard, I mean, when you talk about satellite imagery, the moment you would start to have an idea, maybe wants to try something, you would have to pass typically an order of several thousands of dollars in order to get your image, whatever, let's say this it could be very small, what you want to monitor at first. There's this kind of a little bit this gap or to start with. And there, thanks to actually our partner Skywatch, we could benefit from volume discount, from less constraints in what you can order, and you can start to have an image for a few dollars. And then the moment you want to task a satellite to get a new image, there you can start also quite low now, so for $250. And that starts to be interesting. That starts to unlock, I mean, or let people start to test things and be a bit creative, which was really difficult before. And so that now is possible, I'd say, through our platform. You can actually decide, look to archive, and also decide if you want regularly image that are tasked just via the interface, actually. Of course, around that, that's really also where we going. We want to be nicely integrable and connected to external the source of data. You are maybe manipulating your data in ArcGIS, in QGIS. You want to easily move from one to the other through the platform. So that's where we have small plugins, add-ins, allowing to do that. We embedded in the safe software. So that's the things we try to push also more now, because that allows you to build more complex workflows. So just to show you, before I show you more the alerting monitoring part of things, just have a small video. Tell me if you don't see it. It should be running now. So that's just show you a little bit the process. How do you basically start to extract information from the platform? So in this example, it is about actually solar panels. So you would see that there was multiple examples provided. This is what you see here in green, in these small yellow boxes, which are basically what the model will be trained on and what he will learn. And so in that, usually you try to give examples that are diverse. You try also to show counter examples. So it could be, for instance, showing things that are not solar panels, but may have a bit the same shape, a bit the same color on the roofs. And then you can start to validate and have some scores. I was just wondering, it goes super fast. I don't know if there's a factor of speed. Then the moment you launch it, what is very nice in that example was actually that it was a WMS server behind. So really the machine learning model is then run on a tile by tile basis. And so basically that's what we see just at the beginning. And then what's nice that then you just take the tiles along the way and you don't have to fetch all the data at once, store it, process it. So that's much more efficient. So that's the kind of ways you can also nicely scale things up. So now, when we move from that, so that's basically a one-time extraction of information. The moment you want to go into having a monitoring, so is there a change of these solar panels, for instance, over time? You need really to have this feed of data coming in. And that's where the availability, the pricing is something that starts to be quite critical. And then you need to have this plugged automatically to your algorithms, and that can be run automatically without having you to follow that too easily. And then, of course, that brings up quite a lot of questions. How do you want to display that? I mean, when you bring the time aspect in terms of interaction and reporting, so that's also something that needs to be handled, and that's kind of an additional step to get into. So around this data thing I was saying, we try we try our best, let's say, with partners. It's, I think, interesting to see what's going on, and I think there's a bit of reflection for the other among you that deal with satellite imagery, is that there has been somehow a lot of promise. If you look at companies like Planet, that would disrupt the whole industry. They have been disrupting with their product what they brought now with this daily imagery, for instance, of Planetscope, but it's not following in terms of pricing. If you look at it, they even actually were thinking to raise up again some of their price on the SkySat, for instance. So things are not linearly just going down. So that's something that we see is happening, but probably a bit slower than we would have expected probably 2 years ago. So that's something we have to deal with basically. Then of course this possibility to task imagery in a way that is completely let's say integrated with our platform, that's also thanks to some of these distributor like Skywatch that are in between, and then manage to really build on top of that something that is completely programmatic. And then us, it was just a matter to bring this in and then plug what we had in terms of machine learning into this. So this capacity to extract information and then can bring this into extracting change. That's also something that then is really interconnected and doesn't make a big difference. And then that's the interesting thing that we see more now is how do you handle that alerting, that monitoring? Then you enter into discussion of getting notification, maybe on mobile, on emails, and that's where you really start to think what is the way this information has the most value for the user. So I have 3 examples. So the first one I want to show is based on Sentinel. So this is about deforestation. And so this is something we've been running since quite some time with SGS, where basically they provide a service of basically a certification of trees and of forests. And so there they are often doing services with certain countries that want to track what's going on in terms of either legal exploitation of forest parcels, and they want to be sure they are compliant, or protected areas where they want to be sure there's no deforestation. And so they're basically plugging basically this feed of imagery from Sentinel-2 into our model that is basically detecting these deforestations. Then we had a dedicated interface for that, basically, where you could see the change, navigate over time to basically get these alerts and then check on the terrain. So they were looking at basically which parcels had an alert. That's interesting because but this case was with Liberia now currently running. But that's something that there's many actually other protected areas, other countries that are relevant. If now moving to very high resolution, that's an interesting one where we've been like looking at pipelines, and so this is gas pipeline that is below the ground. And in this case, again, what is interesting is that this is a difficult case for satellite imagery. You need to be able to acquire image for a small corridor, very narrow. So there you enter quickly into the tricky situation where you may have the cost that explodes. And so there also we could nicely go through that thanks to our partner, and have to deal with, in the end, the cost per the kilometer of pipeline starts to be reasonable. But that's these typical applications that are just starting now to be possible due to the cost. Before it was just impossible to consider that. And there, so with this feed of imagery coming, then we had a change detection model that was tuned, so specifically for construction sites. So what you see in the middle of the image actually is a construction site, and so we wanted to focus on seeing those change as an alert. And then the report is interactive, so you can actually click along the corridor and on the alerts that are there in order to see the before after image. And then finally, this interesting case also, again on very high resolution imagery, so 50 centimeter. That's you want actually there to look at these small parcels, which are actually farms, not in Switzerland, as you can see. And basically there, again, a bit the same process. So it's about change detection. And what you want to see there is if there has been a certain structure that should not be there actually, if there's some waste that are just laying down. And so basically if one site is starting to be a bit abandoned or not run properly. And there it's also really the goal that this information is used by the people on the ground that have to do the regular checks, and they can be much more focused in their work. And so there's all the discussion about what they could be notified by email, etc., and have this interactive report. And so that's interesting that the moment you have these two pieces, so the data coming in and then the algorithm, then it opens up this whole field of how do you integrate really that information into the job of these users. And they have definitely synergies, parallels, and that's what we are really working on now, is to see a little bit what are the part that is really specific to each client, what is more common. But that's really now the direction we are going. And so that just on that example, so you would see a bit better a concrete example. You see on this small before after image, there's kind of a long stripe. I don't know if you see my mouse, probably. Yeah. This stripe is actually, you see, dried leaves of trees. It's not that this is not necessarily compliant, but that was a test. So actually, it was very interesting as a project. So they went on so we tasked the satellite for a certain date, knowing the date the day before they came, put some stuff on the ground, and then we got basically the image taken. And so that was a nice setup. It was interesting also to see when you want to have for sure an image taken a certain date. That's a bit of back and forth, and there's some things like that when you want to ensure. Hopefully there was a place where there was not too much cloud, and that was removing a problem. So yeah, just to a bit conclude around that. So I think it's what I wanted to bring a bit today is this thing about, so on the satellite side, there's still something that has to move. And what we start to see now is actually each time these costs and these constraints around the costs are changing, it's opening up a lot of applications. And I think that's what will continue to happen in the coming years, is that it's the right time now to also be creative, and that people can start to reconsider satellite imagery that has probably been pushed away maybe some years ago due to the cost, and the resolution should also continue to increase. So the possibilities are really opening up. And then otherwise, yeah, on the machine learning side of things, as I was saying, that now we came up to a situation where this extraction is working well, is accessible, and I would say what's ahead of us, and that's making probably quite then a step, is if we would start to consider really time series, going for complex anomalies. That's then really doing then another jump. So now when we had this extraction of one image or change detection is something that is well handled in one type, and then the next move is really going to time series, I would say. And yeah, I hope that this was insightful for you a little bit, also to see how this data could be brought back to users a bit in different ways. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Frank, for this really nice presentation. And I think you was able to show really clearly it's not a question of a topic. So the data is around, actually the tools are around to get information out of the data, independent of the topic. And there is a lot of movement, in particular in terms of costs of satellite data. And what you nicely also pointed out, there is a lot of applications. So there are customers, there is a need for this information and extraction of this information. And one step or one next step could be really going into time series, which is a different topic, because you need to look also a bit into the back, so into the past. So you can go and working with the data already existing, the archive data, and getting knowledge out of it. And I think this is something the next speaker will address also a bit. So unfortunately, we not really have questions right now, but you can send it via mail, either to us or to Frank directly. Write it in the chat so we can pick up some questions for later on.